Welcome to Aspire to Retire.
The show that helps you plan smarter, retire with confidence, and enjoy that future you worked so hard for.
We're diving into the strategies and insights you need to build a secure and fulfilling retirement.
No jargon, no confusion, just clear, expert advice to help you take control of your retirement.
Because when it comes to your financial future,
every decision matters.
This is Aspire to Retire.
Hello and welcome to Aspire to Retire. I'm your host, Cheryl Nelson. Today we're talking about how retirees and how pre-retirees can navigate the current volatile markets without losing sleep. Joining me are local financial fiduciaries Ralph and Tim Short, part of the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners, a Richmond area firm that focuses on helping people plan for a successful retirement. They are also popular radio hosts on Sunday morning, and they will help us break down the risks, opportunities, and strategies available right now. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Always good to see you.
Thanks for having us.
Let's dive right into this. The markets have been bouncing up and down. How should retirees really think about this volatility right now?
I would say to most people that's just natural for the markets to go up and down. It's always done that, always will do that. You just have to be prepared for it and understand that's part of the process of into the stock market. That's just going up and down. So you need to focus on what your plan is and what your time horizon is and not lose so much sleep over it. Do what is best for you, not what the market is saying, what's best for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the market's always going to be volatile, right? No matter what environment we're in, you're going to see some ups, you're going to see some downs. What you got to focus in on is what you need, what you want, when you're going to retire. So there's a lot of things that incorporate, into that question is, if we're looking to retire next year, we probably need to take a little bit less risk today than 20 years ago or maybe even 30 years ago. So the market's always going to be volatile. You just got to make sure that you do what's right for yourself.
Right.
And I would say most people, they need to have an understanding of the market's going to go up and down, but you need to have some type of steady investments that you don't have to worry so much about. And that's kind of what we talk to people about.
It's hard not to react to it, though, because I know I'm very reactive. So when I see things happening, I either just don't look at it, put blinders on, or I want to scramble and make changes immediately. So what's the biggest mistake that retirees make when they react to the market?
I would say knee-jerk reaction is the biggest mistake. And I mean, back in 2008, when everything went down all of a sudden, the best advice I had people to do is cut off the TV. Don't sit there and dwell on it, because you can get pretty depressed when you sit there and listen to all the commentators and what they say is going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen. You just have to, have a plan, and that's the number one thing you need to do, and then do what your plan is saying to you to do.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point of, there's a lot of people that get emotional when they see their money go down, and nobody wants to lose money, right? I think we can all kind of raise our hands and say, hey, I don't want to lose money. But the fact of the matter is, if you've got your money in the stock market, there is a chance of you losing funds, right? So I think that's the value of having, because there's a lot of people that are do-it-yourselfers when it comes to building up their wealth, right? Which is great, and there's a lot of people who are very successful at doing so. But once you get into retirement or close to retirement, having a team behind you, maybe a few more voices that can say, hey, let's relax, let's calm down, this is part of the plan, this is what things look like, instead of, earlier this year, we had a downfall in the market, and there was a lot of people that sold out. Well, guess what? It rebounded pretty quick. So they kind of lost on some, if not all of that rebound.
And I would say for most people, you just need to have a steady hand and have somebody help you go through there, whether it's a second opinion by a fiduciary or just somebody, maybe it's your wife, maybe it's a close friend, it just calms you down a little bit, because the worst thing that you can do is have a knee-jerk reaction and sell when it's down. Just to kind of give you an instance, the S&P 500 over the last 20 years has gained somewhere around 7.5 to 7.9. What's the average investor is around 2. So guess what? The difference between the same time period is that knee-jerk reaction.
Interesting. Now, has anybody ever called you financial therapists? Because I feel like in a way, you're almost like a therapist for people too.
Well, nobody's called us that, but we've make the joke around the offices sometimes. There's a lot of hand-holding that goes on, which is part of the job.
Yeah.
But, that's why, it's very important to be prepared as you're getting closer to retirement, so then you don't necessarily have to be talked off the ledge.
Right. Yeah, that's good to know. All right. And is cash still considered king, or would you say sitting on the sidelines is a losing strategy. What do people do about that now?
Well, a lot of people, we see it quite a bit more and more often now, is they have a lot of cash sitting in the bank. Well, if we've got inflation at 3% or whatever it is, I mean, a few years ago it was up to almost 9%. So if your money is making you 0.03%, but inflation is higher than that, you're not losing any money. I mean, it's protected, but you're losing your buying power, and that's what money does, right? I know people think money brings you happiness, not necessarily, but that's what money is supposed to do, is buy things. If your purchasing power is less next year than it was this year, what are you really accomplishing? And really it's to find the happy medium of what you need, because you do need money in the bank. Cash has always been king, but you've always got to make sure that your money's working for you. When it's sitting in the bank, it's not necessarily working. Might make you feel a little bit comfortable, right? Hey, I've got $500,000 sitting in the bank, and we see that quite often, right? Well, I feel comfortable with it. Yeah, but it's not working. So you got to figure out what you necessarily need to have liquid, safe, and in the bank, and then deploy that elsewhere.
And I would say to most people, you need to understand there's not one perfect investment. If you want liquidity, you got to have cash to do that, but that's not going to take you down the road for 25 to 30 years from now, because guess what? You're probably going to run out of money because it's not growing fast enough for you.
All right, gosh. So how do you balance growth versus safety in retirement portfolios today?
Well, we get this quite a bit as well, right? So there's a lot of different strategies that people aren't accustomed to because they use their 401ks or their TSPs. They put pre-tax contributions into the account, not knowing that they're going to have to start paying taxes when they take the withdrawals. But there are strategies to do that, not necessarily inside that account, right? So if it's your TSP, 403B, 401k, whatever account that you've got through your employer, there are ways outside of doing so. But people think if we've got protection, we're not going to see any growth because they think of money market accounts, the bank, CDs, that type of thing. Well, yeah, obviously there's not going to be a whole lot of growth potential there. A lot of that's going to be tied to interest rates, but there are ways of having protection and still making a good return if the market deems so.
Is it ever too late to adjust your retirement plan, or should you just kind of leave things be after a certain age?
It's never too late to start looking at how things are different now than they were 20 years ago. Because guess what, Cheryl? 20 years ago, you were probably at a different stage in your life, and you've got different goals and aspirations now. So everything's going to change as we get older. Maybe your health has changed, things like that. So you just kind of have to make sure that your plan is designed to do what you want to. And guess what? There are going to be curveballs that's thrown at you. Life does that to us, always. So just be prepared.
Yeah, and you've got to be flexible. And I think that's key, is a lot of people kind of sit it and forget it. Well, you're not taking a look at tomorrow's a new day, right? Tomorrow's going to be different than today, so on and so forth.
Right.
Whether it's 20 years or 1 year or whatever, you got to make sure that you adjust. And once again, like with our review process, those are things that we talk about. What's changed in your life? What have you increased as far as spending? What have you decreased as far as spending? What's happened in the family? So there's a lot of things that you've got to incorporate.
Good discussion, guys. We have to take a brief break, but before we do that, Tim, we have a special offer. Tell us about it.
That we do. So the first 10 callers from today's program, if you've saved $250,000 or more, pick up the phone, give us a call. We'll bring us into the office where we'll personally sit with you and create your very own retirement roadmap. And best part is we'll do it on a complimentary basis.
Love that, Tim. Thank you so much. And we are going to open up those phone lines. So if you would like some personal advice about retirement planning or to schedule a consultation, call that number, 833-897-4845. Or if you're not feeling chatty, simply scan the QR code on the bottom of your screen. More to come after the break. Don't go anywhere.
Imagine the future you've been wanting all along. A world where your retirement income is covered and you don't have to worry. Your financial assets are protected, and you have an experienced team fighting every day to grow your assets. Imagine a company creating tax strategies and legacy plans to make sure your loved ones are protected no matter what happens. At Welcome Home Financial Partners, we're an experienced financial team with the right professional licenses and an unbreakable commitment to making our clients feel like family. Here you'll find determined, friendly faces in a world filled with obstacles and problems. We help plan your retirement income to ensure you won't run out of money in retirement. We build in protection to make sure your assets are covered on all sides. We focus on growing your wealth to combat inflation and rising cost of living. And we design tax strategies to help you avoid paying back what you shouldn't while protecting the people you love. Our team never stops fighting for you. With an unparalleled work ethic, we work hard because we know your future depends on it. We're proud to help you choose the life you want to live in retirement. Welcome to your financial future. We're so glad you're here.
Welcome back to Aspire to Retire. We're having some great conversation today, so let's hop right back in. All right, guys, so inflation, we're talking about that, and it's cooled somewhat, but remains sticky, I'll say. So how is this affecting retirees?
Well, how many times have we heard that word inflation over the last few years, right? You know, if you haven't heard of it, you haven't been paying attention to anything.
Right.
Inflation's always going to be there at some point. We just don't know what that percentage looks like. But, you know, you can say, okay, inflation's back down to somewhere around 3%. Okay, great. That sounds wonderful. But on the same side is that doesn't incorporate, you know, food prices are still high. Car insurance, some insurances are up dramatically from 2020, right? So it's not really taking into account different sectors of everyday living, right? But on the same side is inflation is not the end all be all and is not the only thing that could potentially wreck your retirement. Yes, we need to make sure, like we talked about in the first segment, if we've got too much money in the bank, inflation's higher than what we're earning, we're losing buying power. So you've got to incorporate that. But there are also other things to incorporate.
And I would say to most people, you need to understand you can sit there and listen to 2 or 3% inflation rate or 9% inflation rate. What does that really mean? Most people don't understand what percentages mean to you. I'll give you an example. I mean, back in the 80s, we're sitting there looking at a 1,800 square foot home costing you around $50,000, and today that same house is going to be about $500,000, depending upon where you live. But that's the thing that affects you. I mean, who, Cheryl, would you ever had imagined that we're paying for a car what we used to pay for a house?
This is incredible to me. So why has that gone up astronomically, but our wages have not? Who can answer that question?
Well, that is a good question, but that's one thing that you've got to pay attention to, and that kind of goes down to debt management also is, you know, one of the things that we hear quite a bit is, hey, should I pay off my house right now? Well, it depends on how you want to pay the house off, right? Is it any sense in taking out your 401k and just dumping it into your home and now you don't have that expense? Well, now you've lost all your investable assets, then what, right? So there's a lot of things to incorporate there.
And also, if you did something like that, that might affect your Medicare premium if you were on Medicare, because now it's gone from a couple $100 to maybe $600-700 a month. So those are all those are all things with IRMA and things like that that you need to take
How would
consideration.
that affect your Medicare? Just out of curiosity.
Because of the income levels that they have that increases your Medicare premium. So those are all things that we sit down and talk to people about, because it's not, whatever you do today, you need to understand how it affects you down the road. And those are all issues that most people don't take into consideration. The other thing is, if your mortgage is 2.5 to 3.5%, why are you going to pay it off when you can get 6 or 8% in your investment program?
Right.
It doesn't make financial sense.
Right.
But emotionally, it may allow you to sleep better at night, but that's something you have to decide to do.
Because so many people think, oh, I just want to be debt free. I want to have no debt. And they think that's the be all end all and they're good.
Right, but it takes a little bit more discussion than just that right there.
Okay, that's good to know. So how can retirees protect their buying power over the next 10 to 20 years? Let's say people are watching and they're going, okay, so what should I be doing?
Well, I think diversification is key, right? But that term is often overused, just kind of like inflation, in my opinion. Is, you know, diversification doesn't mean we go out and buy 1 million different shares of stock, right? That's not what we're looking to do, because then at that point in time, you're kind of diluting what you potentially could be earning, right? Because everything needs to work kind of in the same manner at the same time, and we know that life isn't perfect, right? You need to have some growth stocks. You need to still be in the stock market to a point. Most people need to be. But guaranteed income, I think, is often overlooked, right? If you can ensure that, hey, your expenses, your lifestyle is taken care of when it comes to the guarantees, then we could take a look at running a little bit more risk on some of the other money. But you don't want to have everything just inside of your 401k. You don't want everything just inside your TSP. You don't want everything sitting into the bank account, right? You got to make sure that your plan is working. You need to have some diversification, but also too, you got to incorporate your taxation. And that's another thing that we find that's overlooked is there's so many people out there that don't know, hey, or maybe not know, but don't pay attention to the fact that if we're saving pre-tax money, we haven't paid taxes on it. Well, when we pull money out, we're going to have to start paying taxes. So if tax rates increase, what's going to happen with your income?
Oh man, taxes. And I like what you said about buckets too, almost like these mugs or buckets. Put some money here, some here, some here, right? You got to spread it around.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think most people really has never taken a look at what their expenses are now or what they're going to be. And that's the key to the income plan or retirement plan or anything you want to talk about. Cash flow, what's it going to be like? So you can do those buckets.
I will say, and maybe a lot of people watching are like this, I know personally, I don't want to. I don't want to think about what I'm spending or what I will be spending. It's too hard to think about, and that's where professionals like you come in.
Oh, absolutely. We get that quite a bit. But if you don't know what your budget looks like, if you don't know what you need in retirement, how are you going to know when you can retire?
I know.
And that's what it comes down to is, yes, is it the most fun conversation to talk about what your Amazon bill looks like or whatever, company you're spending money with, right? You've got to make sure that you've got those numbers incorporated, because if we're going to need X amount of dollars, we need to know that, right? Because our expenses aren't going to stop. Spending habits a lot of times don't stop either.
Right. Good advice there. I got to take this advice as I creep closer to retirement. So how about Social Security? Should people delay Social Security to hedge inflation?
I think for most people, that's one of the hardest questions they always come in and ask about, because there's so many different thought patterns on that. Some people don't believe Social Security is going to be around. Some people think that, it's always going to be here. We just don't know. But the thing that you need to understand is that Social Security is a part of your plan, but it does not mean that's the entire plan. It was never designed to have 100% of your expenses paid. It's always a portion of it. And if you haven't done a good job at the other side, it may not help you at all. And you don't know when you need to have Social Security come in, either at 70 or 62 or 65. It depends on your situation. Nobody can just say, this is what you need to do. It depends on you.
Right.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that we talk about quite a bit, because there are ways to maximize Social Security strategies, but that doesn't necessarily fit inside your overall plan. Because if you retire at 55 and you want to wait until full retirement age, most people now full retirement age is age 67. That's 12 years where you got to compensate your paycheck. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to spend down on your assets. So you probably have a little bit more control over than Social Security. But there's different ways of doing it. I mean, there's spousal benefits, there's widow benefits, there's divorce, but there's so many things that you can take a look at, and a lot of people aren't fully aware of those.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that I think we just don't know. We're not taught this in school, and we're not really taught about Medicare and healthcare planning with rising costs. What's your advice on that topic?
Just really understand that as we get older, your medical costs are going to be a lot more than it ever has been. And those are some scary thoughts, because now all of a sudden a hospital stay that used to cost you 10 grand now costs maybe $75,000. So that's just, you have a plan in place, whether it's insurance or whether it's in your taking out of your investments. Most people can't afford that from your investments, but some people can.
Yeah, so what do people do then if they can't afford this kind of care? I mean, I know there's Medicare, right? But that doesn't cover everything. So then what?
Well, Medicare, but there's also Medicaid, but there's a difference between the two. One of them is Medicare because you're age 65. Medicaid means that you don't have enough assets to pay those bills. You have to go down to about $3,000 in assets to qualify. And most people don't want to have only $3,000 in assets.
Wow, no, that's a lot to think about. And then of course, annuities, talking about that, what role do annuities play in creating inflation-adjusted income?
Well, you can have guaranteed income coming from an annuity, but an annuity is one of those things that we hear quite a bit of. Oh, I was told I shouldn't get into one, that's restrictive, the money goes to the company if I die. It is an instrument that you could potentially use for your retirement plan. It's not going to be for everybody, just like buying in stock or bonds or mutual funds or whatever, right? It's all about what you need, going back to the budget, what you need, but then also too what you want for retirement. So annuities can provide protection from the market. They could guarantee you lifetime income. There's a lot of things. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife, if you will. But once again, it's not the end all be all for everybody. But that's why we do our retirement roadmap process, to take a look and see where you are and then kind of determine from that point moving forward what recommendations we would have.
Okay, yeah. I always love chatting with you guys. I learn something new every time we do this show. It is time for another commercial break. But Tim, once again, tell us about our special offer.
Absolutely. So the first 10 callers from today's program, pick up the phone, give us a call. We'd love to bring you into the office where we'll create your very own retirement roadmap just for you. And the best part is, Cheryl, we'll do it on a complimentary basis. So
keep those questions coming. Take advantage of our professionals. Call right now and even schedule that consultation. Again, 833-897-4845. Coming up next, we'll feature some of your burning questions. Stay right there.
It was the longest-running bull market in history. Everything was looking up. While inverted yield curves pointed to a recession, the market kept going. And then, if you're planning to retire soon, that could spell bad news for your returns. Our team can help you better withstand the bear market. Now more than ever, you need a financial professional to stand with you. Visit our website to learn more about our services. You can call or email our office to schedule your complimentary consultation today.
Welcome back to Aspire to Retire. It is our favorite part of the show. Time to feature some of your questions. As always, thanks so much for writing in and calling in to us. We'll start with Brenda from Farmville. Brenda says, how do I figure out a safe withdrawal rate so I don't run out of money?
Well, the old rule of thumb is 4%, right? But it kind of depends on who you're listening to, because there's other talking heads out there that could say north of 10%, right? Really what it comes down to, once again, is the retirement roadmap process that we designed for you, because it's not going to be 3% or 4%, because the old school rule is the 4% rule of thumb, right? But potentially you could pull out more, potentially you could pull out less. It just depends on your overall retirement plan, because if you've got everything into the stock market and things aren't going well and you're losing money, worst thing you can do is still pull money out of that account, right? Because then you're going to need a lot more to get back to where you were before. You don't want to run out of money. So Brenda, I think what it comes down to is not necessarily just a certain percentage per year. It's more about what you're going to need, and also too what your investments will look like and what they're currently doing.
All right, next up is Thomas from Petersburg. Thomas says, is the 4% rule still reliable in today's economy?
It's a guideline that you can take a look at, but it all depends, like Tim was saying just a minute ago, based on what you're trying to do. I mean, I just had a client that came in the other day that said, listen, this is what I've got in my investments, but this is all pre-tax. I would like to have some Roth down the road, tax-free income. How do I need to do that? And I said, well, it depends on what you're trying to do. He did not want to have that amount of money coming to his kids. They would have to pay taxes on when they received it after he was gone. So we can develop a plan to maybe, if it works for you, to start taking some money out of that, so it will reduce your RMDs later down the road, okay? But at the same time, it gives tax-free income either to you if you need it, or it's going to your kids or beneficiary tax-free. It depends on what you're trying to do, Thomas.
Yeah, a lot of people asking about that 4% there, so good to hear from both of you on that. Next up is Elaine from Charlottesville. Elaine says, should I keep money in stocks during retirement to help my savings last longer?
Well, I think, you know, for most people, I wouldn't tell them to fully vacate the market, but I think there's a lot of risk that needs to be taken off the table once we get close to retirement or being in retirement. But, you know, when the stock market's performing well, most stocks are going to do well, right? So you need to make sure that you still can participate in that, but there's also protected growth strategies to take a look at too that potentially could make you a double-digit return depending on what the market does. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. Would I tell anybody to completely vacate the market? It's potentially, but not always all the time. So you need to make sure that you do have a mix of growth and protection.
And I would say to most people, you need to know what your expenses are going to be. Do you need to take some more money out? And you don't need to have everything in the market as you are growing because greed can get in your way. Greed can affect your retirement down the road, because if you still are in the market and we have a 2008, you're probably not going to have a lot of good thoughts about your retirement plan at that point in time.
Right, yeah, and then there's surprises like in 2008. And the next question, George from Ashland says, how much of my budget should I plan for unexpected expenses like those pesky home repairs? They always happen at the worst time, right? Like when the AC goes out when it's super hot in the middle of summer.
Oh, for sure. And also, too, you know, car repairs. I mean,
car repairs.
That's nothing fun to talk about either. We've recently run into that ourselves. But yeah, I think what it's important to do is you need to make sure that you do have liquidity that's set aside in the bank, right? Talking about rules of thumb, which we've talked about in a few of these questions, is, you know, it used to be 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. You need to make sure that you've got set aside in the bank for emergencies, whether it's your heat pump, whether it's car maintenance, whether it's whatever. I think that's a good rule of thumb to use, but it also kind of depends on your overall monthly expenditures. I mean, there's people who are spending $12,000 a month. or there's people who are only spending $2,000 a month. So everybody's liquid bucket's going to look a little bit different, but you've got to make sure that you do have that there. Whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, I don't recommend $500,000 in the bank because it's not really working for you.
Well, I don't know how many people have that anyway.
You'd be surprised.
Are you kidding me?
I had a lady that came in and we were talking and she said, I'm very upset that I don't have enough money in the bank. I said, okay, you've got this amount of money. How much do you want? She said, $500,000. I said, you've got $496,000. What are you worried about, lady?
Wow, sounds like I need to make some new friends.
But that does happen.
All right. Next up is Carol from Hopewell. Carol says, would downsizing my home be a smart way to stretch my retirement savings? That's a good question.
I would say to her, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you can downsize and not have a mortgage, that might be one thing. But right now, in this day and age, your amount of money that you're going to receive from the sale of your house is probably going to buy about half of what you've got right now. So those are all considerations that you need to kind of figure out. And you don't want to take money out of a 401k and pay taxes on it, because then it reduces everything.
Oh man, not to mention the expenses of moving too and the stress that comes with that.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I think there's a lot of people that potentially might have to move just because they can't navigate the steps or the maintenance has gotten to be too much. But a lot of times now is that, you know, if you were in your home for quite some time, you've got some good equity there, but like that says, you're going to, you know, have to drop probably all of that on the new place, and it's probably still going to have a mortgage with it. So you've got to make sure that it makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. Henry from Louisa says, what's better for longevity planning, annuities or just living off investments?
Well, I think it kind of depends, going back to the retirement roadmap, is, you know, what we're essentially going to need. I mean, if we're going to have to guarantee, if we don't have as much savings, then maybe the annuity route's a little bit better, because then we can ensure that we're going to have X amount of dollars coming to you, right? Now, if you don't need the guarantee, then maybe stay in the stock market or funds or whatever that looks like. But once again, it's all about that individual person.
All right, very good advice there. Well, that's all the time that we have for today on today's show. But remember, the markets and inflation may be unpredictable, but your retirement does not have to be. With the right planning, you can create stability in uncertain times. So, of course, we want to thank Ralph and Tim as always, and thank you for joining us on Aspire to Retire. But before we wrap up, Tim, one last reminder.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. So the first 10 callers from today's program, if you've saved $250,000 or more for retirement, pick up the phone, give us a call. We'd love the opportunity to bring you into the office, and we'll create your very own retirement roadmap just for you. Best part is we'll do it on a complimentary basis.
All right, Tim, thank you so much. And don't wait. Again, the first 10 callers, as Tim said, will receive a complimentary, no obligation retirement review to help ensure that you are on the right track. So if you have saved at least $250,000 for retirement, call right now. That number, once again, 833-897-4845 to claim your spot, or simply scan that QR code on the bottom of your screen. On behalf of all of us at Aspire to Retire, I'm your host, Cheryl Nelson. Have a great day.